What's up guys, Undead here. You're probably aware by now, Dragoon is absolutely tearing shit up right now. If you look at the popularity rankings, it's pretty much branded in red eyes as the most popular decks in the game. Obviously, branded is the most popular deck in the game, and it can play Dragoon in it. And red eyes being the second most popular deck in the game, their main game plan is Dragoon, but it's not just them. Dark Magician summons Dragoon too. Mechlord did put out a video recently talking about how Dragoon is a lot more fair than people are making it out to be, and that might be the case. However, Dragoon is still a threat that you have to take into consideration. Because of the fact that it is so popular, your deck needs to be able to beat Dragoon, otherwise you're not really going to be able to compete. This is one of those cases where Dragoon is what I like to call a gatekeeper. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be in the best decks in the game. However, he's going to be kind of that threshold that if you can't beat this guy, then you're not going to be able to beat the rest of the meta either. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you all of the different ways that you can adapt so that you can beat Dragoon consistently, and I'll tell you how to do it in such a way that is also going to be helping you against other decks as well. First of all, I want to show you the different decks that play Dragoon so that you can have a general idea of what else they're going to have, because Dragoon doesn't exist in a vacuum. To be able to beat Dragoon, you also have to be able to beat all of the supporting cast that's also beating the Dragoon. Red Eyes is typically going to be setting up a Lord of Red and then another interruption of some form. Lord of Red is going to be 2 destructive pops, 1 on a back row, 1 on a monster, when any effect activates. That is going to make it harder to bait out the opponent's Dragoon by setting up some kind of removal effect. And then the other interruption, whether that be Hieratic Seal. Some people play Dragon Maid Shio as another Omni Negate to protect the Dragoon even further. There's even some people who have figured out a way to summon Savage in this deck, but typically Hieratic Seal is going to be the most common one that you face against. So when considering Red Eyes, they have their 1 Omni Negate of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, then they have removal based interruption in their Seals in Lord of Red, and they might have another Omni Negate in either Seal or Savage. When you're considering the Dark Magician version of the deck, not everyone is caught up and knows that this is the best version of Dark Magician yet, but what both versions are going to be able to set up is the Dragoon, obviously, and then best case scenario, they'll also be able to set up a Magician's Combination, which is an additional Omni Negate. Having that additional Omni Negate is going to make it a bit more difficult, because instead of having 2 effects to try to bait out the Dragoon, now you have to have 3, or you need to have another way of dealing with the combination itself. And then in my version, I also have a lot more outs, considering that I turbo out the Seal. That makes it so much more difficult to deal with Dragoon, but not impossible. But it is the most popular deck in the game, and there's a decent amount of people who are playing Dragoon in it. Now, to be fair, not everybody is playing Dragoon in this deck. However, it is something that you have to keep in mind. They might be going into this. And if they go into it, of course, they're probably also going to have Mirror Jade to be able to banish one of your monsters. Non-target, by the way. They could have Branded in Red to kind of dodge you dealing with the Mirror Jade as well, especially using Ad Libitum as material to bring it back to the field so they can get a second banish. Some people even play 2 Mirror Jades so that they can get 3 banishes on your turn. You got Dramaturge of Despia to negate one of your extra deck monsters, especially helpful against the opponent's Dingirsu that might be getting rid of your Dragoon. They got Retribution that can negate an effect that summons some stuff. They have Mercurier, which is just a straight up a monster negate hand trap. This deck is just probably the most sticky, the most dangerous deck in the game by far, as well as the fact that they can set up Masquerade to burn you to death for trying to break through their board. It's important to be aware of everything that your opponents can do on top of their Dragoon, so you can not just be prepared for the Dragoon itself, but also for everything else that they're doing. If you guys don't know, Dragoon is completely untargetable and indestructible by card effects, and he can discard a card to Omni Negate any of your effects. This doesn't make him a game plan in and of itself, because anybody can play through just 1 Omni Negate, but the fact that he's also protected and the fact that you can also set up a whole game plan around other threats the opponent has to deal with makes this guy more of an imposing force on the field. So if you don't have a way to deal with this guy might just kill you, especially if you're playing him in Dark Magician or Red Eyes, where they can also pop your monsters and burn you for their attack. So when you're considering an opponent's threat, you have to consider, first of all, what are the things that this guy isn't protected from? And second of all, out of all those things that he's not protected from, which of those things would be most useful when considering the whole context of the opponent's field? Okay, so first of all, let's talk about when we go second against the opponent's Dragoon. If the opponent has a Dragoon on the field, obviously if we just so happen to have a Kaiju in our hand, then we can tribute the opponent's Dragoon to summon it to their side of the field. That is going to turn off their negate. However, in certain cases, they are going to be able to revive it. For example, Despia can use Adlib as fusion material to go into one of their branded fusion, which will trigger the Adlib to be able to potentially revive the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. And Red Eyes could search for Red Eyes Spirit to be able to revive their Red Eyes as soon as you kaiju it. So even though the kaijus work, they might not be a catch-all solution just by themselves. Droplet outright turning off the opponent's Dragoon is a lot more versatile, because if the opponent has other monsters on their field, you're also going to be able to negate those at the same time. And if you discard monsters, you're also going to be able to prevent the opponent's monsters from even responding to your droplet, so that your negates definitely go through. That being said, the droplet is going to cost a lot of cards, so you are going to want to play this in a deck that either has other options or that can be combined with the droplet, or if you're okay with discarding a lot of cards. Book of Eclipse doesn't cost anything, and it just baits out the Dragoon. That is one other way to solve the problem, because it doesn't target, it doesn't destroy. You activate it, the opponent has to negate it so that their stuff doesn't go face down. So baiting out that negate, he just becomes untargetable and indestructible, so you can deal with him later on in the turn. For decks that can use traps on the first turn, Ice Dragon's Prison can be kind of nice. If they have a spellcaster in their graveyard, like for example against Dark Magician, then you could revive a spellcaster to your field with IDP and banish it alongside the Dragoon. But the problem with that is, of course, Despia and Red Eyes don't really have spellcasters in their grave. This is just something that can work against Dark Magician specifically. In the extra deck, you could go into Dingirsu to remove your opponent's Dark Dragoon, but the problem is this is a negate. The opponent can negate it with their Dragoon. You could go into Underworld Goddess using the opponent's Dragoon as material, and in the process negating all your opponent's monsters. But the problem with this is that setting up 4 link materials on your field isn't going to be as easy to do if your opponent has interruptions to remove your monster. Typhon is probably the best option. That being said, after summoning this, you can't summon anything else. You summon this and the opponent's Dragoon can't activate, the opponent's Mirror Jade can activate, and you can activate this to non-target bounce the opponent's Dragoon, and they won't be able to negate it. But like I said, you can't summon anything else after this. These are the cards that everyone is going to be mentioning when it comes to beating Dragoon. But like I said, every single one of these does have a weakness. Eclipse doesn't out the Dragoon, it just baits out the negate. And if the opponent has another negate like Combination, then the bait didn't work. You see, the problem with Dragoon is that, like I said, he's not a standalone threat. He's a threat backed up by other threats. The only way that Dragoon isn't a threat if your opponent is a bit of a monkey who just activated Red Eyes Fusion, and Dragoon is the only thing they set up. But there is no successful Red Eyes deck in the game that is only setting up Dragoon. Always setting up other forms of protection and other forms of interruption as well. So what the hell do we do about the Dragoon? It all comes down to deck choice. The deck that you choose needs to have inherent ways to deal with the opponent's threats. And you could go about this in a couple of different ways. Your deck could either have inherent ways of dealing with Dragoon specifically, or it could have inherent ways of dealing with the rest of the opponent's stuff, so that the cards that directly answer Dragoon, you can max out on those, so you can specifically deal with the Dragoon there. Shino Birds is just going to be my first example deck. This deck has its Shino Baron Peacock, so it's very good at removing opponent's cards, and it's also good at Shinato's Judgment skill. Going second, you can set up Shinato, set up Change of Heart. Change of Heart does target, so it doesn't actually work against Dragoon, but it can deal with the other opponent's threats. Like if you target the opponent's Mirror Jade, they have to tag out, or you're going to take their Mirror Jade away from them, and that does in effect take away one of their interruptions. Against Red Eyes, you could take their Lord of Red, they might pop itself in response, but will deal with their Lord of Red. It's not going to be on their field anymore. And against Dark Magician, you could steal the opponent's Hieratic Seal. That would definitely cut off that. They would be forced to fuse right into their Dragoon, so that your anti-Dragoon mechanisms can start working from there. And worst things worst, if they have Combination, then they'll negate it with Combination. And after that, you've used your inherent stuff to deal with the other threats the opponent has. You can then use your maxed out tech cards that can deal with Dragoon one-on-one to be able to finish the job there, so that the rest of your deck can play effectively. Especially if you draw more than one of these, it's going to make it even better, because you're going to be able to deal with a lot more of the opponent's threats. So maxing out on these, and the fact that you can keep drawing into them with Nikitama and your Heat Soul, makes it even better. On the other side of the spectrum is deck that will inherently deal with the Dragoon, so that the rest of your deck can deal with the rest of the opponent's threats. The B-Trooper skill, going second, can search for a Kaiju for you, so that that can deal with your opponent's threat, so that afterward, the rest of your deck can try to play through the rest of what the opponent's going to throw at you. So just finishing up on that point there, you either have an inherent way to deal with the opponent's stuff and then tech your deck out to deal with the Dragoon, or your deck has inherent ways to beat the Dragoon and you tech your deck out, or your deck's inherent game plan can deal with the rest of your opponent's threats. But then, this is only if you're going second. If you're going first, Dragoon is going to be more of a problem, because You can't use a kaiju on the opponent's turn. You know what I mean? You can't summon Dingirsu on the opponent's turn, unless you're specifically Orcust, but nobody plays Orcust. Yes, nobody. But you can drop it on the opponent's turn. You can Eclipse on the opponent's turn. So those could turn off the opponent's Dragoon. But that just turns Dragoon to your back row fodder. He'll either negate those or eat those, so that the rest of your plays can be okay, because Dragoon by himself, he's a threat, especially played in Red Eyes, being able to pop 2 of your monsters, burn you, and then attack in. You have to Droplet or Eclipse him, meaning that the rest of what they do is gonna suck. Against Red Eyes, they could summon Lord of Red for summoning their Dragoon, so that the Lord of Red can pop your Eclipse or your Droplet. So in that case, if you're going first, the opponent summons Dragoon against you going second, it's not looking as good anymore. You're going to need to have another plan. Now, probably the best way to deal with Dragoon when you're going first is to have a way to negate the card that's going to summon him in the first place. Whatever way that they have to summon this guy, you're going to try your best to negate that spell. If your deck has any spell negation, that is probably the safest way to deal with Dragoon. And that's not going to be the only interruption you set up. You have to set up a bunch of other protection to prevent the opponent's board breaker from turning off your back row negation. If you can protect your back row negation, then you're going to be able to safely prevent the Dragoon. The opponent's goal against you is going to be to get rid of your back row negation before they summon Dragoon. So you have to do your best to create a game plan, has a back row negate, and protects it. A good way to do that is in Drytron, they do have multiple ways to negate the opponent. You could set up Mubeta Fafnir, which can negate a spell card. That could be one of your ways, and they could try to bait you out to try to remove this. But if you set it up alongside a Herald, Herald can also negate back row. It can negate anything. So this is one way to prevent the opponent from baiting you out. Having multiple back row negates means it's more difficult to bait out your back row negates or to remove your back row negate. But just in general, having multiple interruptions is typically going to be a good way to protect your back row negate, as long as you have other interruptions that can stop the opponent from getting rid of your back row negate. But if your deck does not have any way of removing back row, the only real solution you have, making sure that you have 2, not 1, but 2 guaranteed ways of dealing with the opponent's Dragoon as soon as it hits the table. Because once Dragoon hits the table, they're just going to negate the first thing that you do to try to get rid of him anyway. So you need to have that second option, so that one of your options can bait out the Dragoon and the second one can actually nail him in. But the good thing about Droplet is that if you send a monster with its effect, Dragoon is not going to be able to negate it. So Droplet is one of the only cards that by itself can deal with the Dragoon. I say by itself, but you do need to send a monster, so it's kind of by himself. The other thing too is that without Dragoon's negate, he isn't necessarily as much of a threat unless he's being played specifically in Red Eyes or Dark Magician. So if he is being summoned against you when in branded, he's not going to be able to pop your monsters, so he's only going to be there as a way to bait out your negates. So what you could do is use your singular copy of a card that is going to bait out the Dragoon so that they negate that, and then keep the rest of your interruptions for the rest of the stuff that they're going to do. In that case, you really want your deck to have multiple types of interruption that the opponent doesn't want to face against. The reason I'm making this video is because Dragoon coming to the game has got a lot of people complaining about Dragoon. Even though Dragoon is not seeing the most competitive success right now, it is still very popular on ranked. When a very popular card comes into the game, there's 2 options that you can choose. It's up to you, bro. You can either complain about it or you can adapt to it. I've given you some different ways you can tackle the Dragoon in this video, and it's up to you whether or not you actually take advantage of this advice. You have to look at your game plan and figure out, going second, do I have a way to deal with Dragoon, and do I have a way to deal with everything else the opponent can do? And next you have to consider, when going first, the opponent summoning Dragoon against me, do I have a way to prevent the Dragoon or not care about the Dragoon, or pacify the Dragoon enough so that I can still deal with the rest of what the opponent's going to throw at me. If you can't answer these questions for your specific deck, do ask questions in the comments about how you can adapt your deck to be better suited against Dragoon, and I will tell you either that you need to pick a new deck because your deck is too old or cannot adapt well enough, or I will give you different options that you can go to so that you can have a better chance against the Dragoon. Because even though Dragoon might not be the most competitively successful card right now, it is still a card that you have to respect because it is going to be super popular on ranked regardless. So if you're not prepared, you're going to lose to it. So make sure you ask in the comments about your deck. I'll try to give some advice. Maybe other people in the comments will try to give you some advice for how to make your deck adapt to the Dragoon. Because if you don't adapt, you lose. And it's up to you, bro. You're going to lose or you're going to adapt. No, I don't want to sound like a dickhead or anything, but a lot of people seem to actually enjoy complaining because they don't like to adapt. They don't want to change their deck. They don't want to invest in a new deck. They want to play their old deck because they really like it. They aren't ready to let go of their deck that they really like from the past. But in this game, as time moves on, you have to move on too. And when new threats come up, you have to adapt to those threats. And it is very possible. Before I end the video, I thought I would just show you an example of me adapting an old deck. Here's my free-to-play Chimera deck. If I wanted to adapt this deck to be able to beat Dragoon, I know that this deck can win going second using Chimera the Illusion Beast. I know that going first, I can set up so many interruptions with Beatrice and all of my graveyard negates. But going second, I'm still going to struggle. This isn't going to get it done for me. The opponent's threats are going to be able to get rid of my Chimera Illusion Beast. So I'm going to need to adapt my deck to be more able to deal with the opponent's boards going first and going second, primarily using board breakers, to be real with you. So I can put Radiant in my deck. This happens to be a Fiend monster, so it does synergize because I can go into my Chimera King of Phantom Beast using my Radiant in the worst case scenario, and it contribute the opponent's boss monsters. I could play Eclipse going second to bait out the opponent's interruption so that it's easier for my effects to resolve, and I could play Droplet as a non-targeting way to chain to either my Chimera Fusion or chain to my Book of Eclipse to ensure that they can resolve while also depowering my opponent's board. Especially considering this deck is completely fine with discard fodder. We could discard Quaddle or Sword Knight, we're completely fine. And just like that, without even upgrading the extra deck, which you definitely should do, go watch the Chimera guide to see how you can play this deck more optimally. But just taking my free-to-play list, I was able to adapt it to Dragoon by adding 6 to 9 cards into the main deck and deal with the opponent's board that has a Dragoon on it. Having 6 to 9 is good because it gives you a higher chance of drawing into it so you can have it more reliably. But I want to know, guys, what are you doing to adapt to Red Eye's Dark Dragoon? Let us know in the comments your ways of dealing with Dragoon so that other people can see the different ways that Dragoon can be beaten, especially in different kinds of decks. But yeah, guys, if you found this video helpful, be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Have yourselves a good one, guys, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low-key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the Weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast. For real.